Imagine walking into a place expecting respect, only to be met with disbelief and judgment. Now, picture how that situation can flip completely on its head. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Ruby, a stubborn bank teller, and the lesson they both learned that day. Ruby Davis was used to being underestimated. At 34, she carried herself with quiet confidence, a trait born from years of hard work and success. Today, she walked into a sleek downtown bank wearing a simple black blazer and jeans. She didn't look like much on the surface, but her presence was magnetic, a quiet energy that turned heads without trying. The bank was busy with a line snaking toward the door. Customers shifted impatiently, fidgeting with phones or sighing heavily. Ruby waited patiently, clutching a slim leather briefcase in one hand and glancing occasionally at her watch. At the counter, Susan Reynolds, the teller, was having a rough morning. Everything seemed to annoy her today, her co-workers, the customers, even the fluorescent lighting overhead. She was in her mid-40s, had a sharp tongue, and prided herself on her ability to read people. The second Ruby stepped forward in line, Susan took one look at her and rolled her eyes. "Next," Susan called, her tone clipped. Ruby smiled warmly and approached the counter. "Good morning," Ruby began, her voice calm and polite. "I'd like to make a wire transfer." Susan gave Ruby a quick once-over, taking in her casual outfit and the lack of flashy jewelry. She assumed Ruby was another time-waster who'd probably overdrawn her account. "What's the amount?" Susan asked, not even bothering to mask her disinterest. $2 million, Ruby replied, unfazed. Susan blinked. "Excuse me," she said, leaning forward like she hadn't heard correctly. $2 million, Ruby repeated, sliding the briefcase onto the counter. "I have all the necessary paperwork." For a moment, Susan stared at Ruby, and then she let out a sharp laugh. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of joke this is, but we don't handle fantasy transactions here." Ruby's calm demeanor didn't waver. "It's not a joke. I can show you the account details. Everything's in order." But Susan wasn't having it. She crossed her arms and smirked. "Look, we're busy today. Why don't you come back when you've got a real request? There's a line behind you." The line behind Ruby grew quiet. People were starting to watch, sensing the tension. Ruby tilted her head slightly, her polite smile fading. "Are you refusing to assist me?" "I'm refusing to waste time," Susan shot back. "Do you even have an account here?" Ruby's jaw tightened. "Yes, I do. Under the name Ruby Davis." Susan typed the name into her computer, fully expecting to find nothing. But then her screen blinked to life, revealing an account balance so large it made her mouth go dry. Her eyes widened, and she quickly minimized the screen, hoping no one else had seen it. "That's impossible," Susan muttered, her confidence faltering. "This must be some kind of error." "It's not," Ruby said, her voice firm now. "I built that account through years of hard work and investments. Now, if you'd like, I can call your manager to assist me instead." Susan's cheeks flushed red. "There's no need for that," she stammered, suddenly feeling the weight of the stares from the other customers. She fumbled with the paperwork Ruby handed her, her hands trembling slightly. As Susan worked, the air between them was thick with tension. Ruby said nothing, her silence speaking volumes. It was clear she was used to moments like this, being doubted, dismissed, and underestimated. But Susan's embarrassment wasn't over yet. Just as Susan finished processing the transaction, the branch manager, Mr. Clark, emerged from his office. He was an older man with a friendly smile, but the moment he saw Ruby, his entire demeanor shifted. "Miss Davis," Mr. Clark exclaimed, hurrying over to shake her hand. "What a pleasure to see you again. How can we assist you today?" Susan froze, her heart sinking. Ruby returned Mr. Clark's handshake warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Clark. I was just trying to make a transfer, but it seems your staff needed a bit of convincing. Mr. Clark's smile faltered as he glanced at Susan. I see. Well, I apologize for any inconvenience. Susan, is everything taken care of? Susan nodded quickly, her face pale. Yes, sir. All set. Ruby looked at Susan for a long moment, then back at Mr. Clark. Mistakes happen, she said simply, her tone forgiving but firm. But I do hope your team will learn not to judge a book by its cover. As Ruby turned to leave, the room felt heavier. Everyone in the bank, from the customers in line to the other tellers, watched her walk out with her head held high. But just before Ruby reached the door, she paused. Turning back, she met Susan's eyes and said, One more thing. Susan looked up nervously. Yes? You should know that the foundation I run, Davis Hearts, has donated over $10 million to local banks like this one, Ruby said, her voice steady but pointed. We believe in giving people second chances. I hope you'll start doing the same. With that, she walked out, leaving Susan speechless. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mr. Clark cleared his throat and gave Susan a stern look before heading back to his office. Susan sat there for a moment, staring at her screen and feeling a knot of shame tighten in her chest. She realized she'd not only judged Ruby unfairly, but also jeopardized her own professionalism. From that day on, Susan made a conscious effort to treat every customer with respect, no matter what they looked like or how they were dressed. And every time she felt herself slipping back into old habits, she thought of Ruby Davis and the grace with which she'd handled the situation. And there you have it, a story about judgment, humility, and the power of second chances. Let's all remember, you never know who's standing in front of you. Treat everyone with respect. It might just change your life.